What happens when the woman everyone called weak becomes the one person a billionaire can't control? What if the divorce that destroyed you was actually setting you free? I walked out of divorce court with one suitcase and an empty bank account while my ex-husband smiled for the cameras like he'd won. 3 months later, his mansion windows started shaking from the sound of engines, and everyone froze when a private jet with a billionaire's logo landed nearby, and I stepped out first. My name is Ayla, and this is how I went from having nothing to becoming untouchable. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises when the judge read the final settlement. I got nothing. Not the apartment we bought together. Not the car I drove for 5 years. Not even the jewelry my grandmother gave me on our wedding day. Rayan sat across from me in his tailored navy suit, looking like he just closed the deal of his life. His lawyer kept passing him notes, and he kept nodding with that slight smirk I used to think was charming. Now it just looked cruel. The judge asked if I had anything to say, and I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Rayan's lawyer stood up quickly and said, "Your Honor, my client's ex-wife has shown signs of instability throughout these proceedings, and we believe her silence now confirms she understands the fairness of this settlement." Fairness. The word hit me like cold water. I wanted to scream that he controlled every dollar I spent for 6 years. That he made me quit my job because he said a wife of his status shouldn't work. That he checked my phone, deleted my contacts, and told everyone I was jealous and paranoid when I questioned him. But I had no proof. He had 3 lawyers and I had a public defender who looked tired before we even started. When I walked out, reporters were waiting. Rayan stopped on the courthouse steps and gave them his perfect statement about moving forward and wishing me well. I kept walking with my suitcase wheels scraping the concrete. Someone yelled, "Is it true you tried to blackmail him?" I didn't turn around. That night, I checked into a motel on the edge of the city. The room had one bed, a broken TV, and a window that didn't lock properly. I sat on the floor and cried until my ribs hurt. Then I stopped. I couldn't afford to break down. I needed a job, a plan, and a way to survive. For 3 weeks, I applied everywhere. Coffee shops, grocery stores, cleaning companies. Most places didn't call back. When they did, they asked about the gap in my resume, and I had to explain I was married and didn't work. Their faces always changed after that. Finally, a small accounting office hired me to do data entry. The pay was low, but it was something. I moved into a shared apartment with 2 other women who didn't ask questions. I bought clothes from thrift stores and learned to make meals that cost less than $3. Rayan's face was everywhere. Magazines, billboards, interviews about his expanding business empire. Everyone loved him. No one remembered me. Then one night my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I know what he did. Meet me tomorrow at the cafe on Forest Street. I can prove it. What if the person offering help knew more about your past than you did? What happens when a stranger hands you proof that your entire marriage was a lie? I stared at that message for 20 minutes before deleting it. It had to be a trap. Rayan probably sent someone to test me or make me look paranoid again. I went to work the next day and tried to forget about it. But during my lunch break, another message came through. "You think I'm working for him?" I'm not. I worked inside his company for 11 years. He destroyed my career too. Now I had a name with the message. Elif Karim, former chief financial officer at Rayan Enterprises. I searched her name online and found articles from 4 years ago. She'd been fired and accused of embezzlement, though charges were never filed. In every photo, she looked sharp and professional. In one interview, she said she was forced out after discovering irregularities in company accounts. My hands were shaking when I typed back, "Why should I trust you?" Her response came immediately. "Because you signed documents you never read, and your name is still on accounts you don't know exist. If an audit happens, you'll go to prison while he walks free. I closed my laptop so hard my coworker looked over. That afternoon, I couldn't focus. Every number I entered was wrong. My supervisor asked if I was feeling all right, and I lied and said yes. When my shift ended, I walked to Forest Street. The cafe was small, with chipped paint and old chairs. Elif was sitting in the back corner, wearing a gray coat and dark sunglasses, even though it was cloudy outside. She looked older than her photos. Tired. I sat down across from her and said, "If this is some kind of game, I'm leaving." She slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything you need is here. Bank transfers, shell companies forge signatures. He used your identity to move money offshore. You were never his wife. You were his cover." I felt sick. She kept talking. "He married you because you had no family, no connections, and a clean financial record. He needed someone trustworthy on paper. When the company started getting attention from international investors, he knew an audit might come. So he divorced you fast and made sure you looked unstable. That way, if investigators found your name on anything, you'd have no credibility." I whispered, "Why are you helping me?" She took off her sunglasses and her eyes were red. "Because I tried to expose him alone, and he buried me. I lost my career, my reputation, and my savings fighting him in court. I don't want that to happen to you. Take the drive. Find someone more powerful than him. Someone he can't intimidate or buy." I took the flash drive and left without ordering anything. Back in my tiny room, I plugged it into my laptop. Files opened. Spreadsheets, contracts, emails. My signature was everywhere. On loan documents I never saw. On account openings in countries I'd never visited. On transfer authorizations worth millions. I wasn't just broke. I was potentially guilty of financial crimes I didn't commit. I spent the entire night reading. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. Rayon had enemies. Every successful man does. And the biggest one was a billionaire named Zane Mercer. He'd been trying to acquire Rayon's company for 3 years. Rayon always refused. But Zane had resources, lawyers, and most importantly, a reason to listen. I drafted an email. Short and direct. "I have evidence of fraud inside Rayon Enterprises. If you want to take him down, I can help." I hit send before I could change my mind. Part 3. What happens when the man everyone fears decides you're worth protecting? What if revenge isn't about getting even, but getting free? Zane Mercer's office was nothing like I expected. It wasn't cold or intimidating. It was warm, with wooden floors, soft lighting, and walls covered in art. His assistant walked me through security and offered me tea. I was too nervous to drink it. When Zane walked in, he didn't look like a billionaire. He wore a simple black shirt and jeans. No tie, no watch that cost more than a car. He was tall, with dark eyes, and a calm expression that made me feel like he already knew everything. He sat across from me and said, "I read your email. Show me what you have." I handed him the flash drive. He plugged it into his laptop and didn't speak for 15 minutes. His face didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. Finally, he looked up. "This is worse than I thought. Rayon isn't just committing fraud. He's running a scheme that could collapse his entire company and take investors down with it. If this gets out the right way, he's finished." I nodded. He leaned back. "But if you go to authorities alone, he'll crush you again. He'll say you fabricated this out of revenge. He'll use his lawyers, his reputation, and his money to make you disappear. You need protection. Legal, financial, and public. I can give you that." My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Why would you help me? He smiled, but it wasn't warm. Because taking down Rayon has been my priority for years. He blocked a merger that would have saved jobs. He's bullied smaller companies out of business. And he's arrogant enough to think no one can touch him. You're giving me the opening I've been waiting for, but I need your full cooperation. You testify. You hand over everything. And you let me control the timing. I hesitated. He continued. I'll cover your legal fees, relocate you if necessary, and make sure Rayon can't threaten or silence you. In return, you give me exclusive access to this evidence, and you follow my strategy exactly. No rogue moves. No emotional decisions. I thought about Ilif's warning, about doing this alone. I looked at Zain and said, I have one condition. He raised an eyebrow. I don't want money. I don't want revenge that makes me look petty. I want him exposed legally and publicly. I want everyone to know what he did. And when it's over, I walk away on my own terms. Zain studied me for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Deal. We shook. Over the next 6 weeks, I lived in a secure apartment Zain's team arranged. Lawyers interviewed me for hours. Forensic accountants traced every document. Media strategists prepared statements. I learned how to speak confidently, how to stay calm under pressure, how to present facts without emotion. Zain checked in twice a week. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he just asked how I was holding up. One night he said, "You're stronger than you think." Most people would have given up. I shook my head. I'm not strong. I'm just done being afraid. He looked at me like he understood something I hadn't said out loud. Meanwhile, Rayon was everywhere. New interviews. New partnerships. He even started a charity. Everyone praised him. No one knew what was coming. Then Zain made his move. He filed a formal complaint with financial regulators. He released a public statement saying new evidence suggested serious misconduct at Rayon Enterprises. He didn't mention my name. Not yet. But the media exploded. Rayon's stock dropped. Investors demanded answers. His lawyers issued denials. And I stayed silent, waiting. What if the man who destroyed you had been planning something even worse? What happens when you realize you were never meant to survive? The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Financial regulators announced a formal investigation into Rayon Enterprises. Rayon held a press conference within hours. He stood in front of his company headquarters looking calm and confident. He called the accusations baseless. He said competitors were trying to damage his reputation. He even laughed when a reporter asked if he was worried. I watched from Zain's office. Zain stood beside me with his arms crossed. He's good, I said. He's practiced, Zain replied. But he doesn't know what's coming next. That evening, Zain called me into a private meeting. His expression was darker than usual. He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. I need to show you something. It was an email chain between Rayon and his head lawyer, dated 2 months before our divorce. The subject line made my stomach drop. Exit strategy for A. I scrolled through the messages. They discussed how to remove my name from certain accounts while keeping it on others. How to time the divorce before the audit. How to create a narrative that I was emotionally unstable and potentially criminal. One email made me stop breathing. If investigators find the offshore transfers, we point to her signatures. She has no resources to fight back. No credibility. She'll take the fall and we'll settle quietly. I read it 3 times. Zain said softly he was setting you up from the beginning. If the audit found those accounts, he was going to let you go to prison. I felt cold. He married me to use me. He divorced me to abandon me. And if things went wrong, he was going to destroy me completely. Zayn closed the laptop. That's why we're not just exposing fraud. We're showing intent, premeditation. He planned to make you a criminal. I looked up at him. When do we move? He checked his watch. Now. Within an hour, Zayn's legal team filed additional documents with regulators. They included the email chain, the forged signatures, the timeline showing Rayon's deliberate strategy, and they included my testimony, sealed and verified. My name was still protected, but the evidence was public. The media went wild. Rayon's stock crashed. Board members called emergency meetings. Investors pulled funding. His lawyers scrambled to respond, but they had nothing. Because everything we filed was true. 2 days later, Zayn told me it was time for the final move. He said Rayon still thinks he can recover. He's telling people you fabricated evidence out of bitterness. He's using his charm and connections to create doubt. We need to show everyone that you're not hiding, that you're not afraid, and that you have power he can't touch. I knew what he meant. The private jet. Zayn had planned it from the start. He said, I'm flying you back to the city publicly. We'll land near his estate. Press will be there. You'll step off that jet looking strong, protected, and untouchable. He won't be able to threaten you. And everyone will see that you're not the broken woman he described. I hesitated. This feels like a show. He nodded. It is. But sometimes perception is the most powerful weapon. You're not doing this for attention. You're doing this so he can't silence you ever again. I agreed. The day of the flight, I wore a simple black suit. No jewelry, no makeup that looked like I was trying too hard. Just clean, professional, and calm. When the jet landed, I could see reporters and cameras everywhere. Rayon's mansion was visible in the distance. Zayn stepped off first. Then he extended his hand, and I took it. I walked down those steps, and every camera turned toward me. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just walked forward. Later that night, the footage was everywhere. Headlines read, Mysterious Woman Emerges in Rayon Scandal. Who is she? Why is billionaire Zayn Mercer protecting her? Rayon's team tried to spin it, but they were too late. The next morning, regulators announced they were expanding the investigation. 3 board members resigned. 2 major investors publicly cut ties. And Rayon finally realized he'd lost. Part 5. What if the best revenge wasn't destroying him, but becoming someone he could never touch again? What happens when you take nothing and turn it into everything? Rayon tried to reach me. 5 calls, 8 texts, all blocked. Then he showed up at Zayn's office building. Security stopped him. He shouted my name in the lobby. I watched from the 20th floor and felt nothing. Zayn stood beside me. Do you want to speak to him? I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. But there was one more thing I needed to do. The court hearings took 3 months. I testified twice. Calm, clear, and factual. Rayon's lawyers tried to break me. They called me bitter. They suggested I was manipulated by Zayn. They questioned my memory and my motives. But I had documents, emails, timelines, expert witnesses. And I had something Rayon never expected. I had credibility because I wasn't asking for anything. I wasn't suing him for money. I wasn't trying to take his assets. I was just telling the truth. The judge ruled in favor of the investigation. Rayon Enterprises was fined heavily. Criminal charges were filed against Rayon and 2 executives. His company began liquidation proceedings. But I still wasn't done. Zayn had offered me a job. a position in his company with a generous salary. I turned it down. He looked surprised. You don't want financial security. I smiled. I want something better. I took the settlement Zane helped me negotiate, not from Rayon, but from the company's insurance as a victim of fraud. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. I used it to start a foundation, an organization that helps spouses trapped by financial abuse. We offer legal aid, financial counseling, and public advocacy. We use real cases as teaching tools, including mine. Rayon's contracts became a case study. His tactics became a warning. His name became a lesson in what not to do. 6 months after the verdict, I was invited to speak at a conference. The room was full of lawyers, activists, and survivors. I told my story, not for sympathy, but for strategy. I explained how abusers use money as control, how they isolate victims, how they create dependence, and I explained how to fight back. Legally, financially, emotionally. After my speech, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. She said, "I'm still married to him. I don't know how to leave." I gave her my card. You don't have to do it alone. That moment felt like winning. Not against Rayon, but for myself. Zane attended the conference. Afterward, we had coffee. He said, "I'm impressed. You could have taken the easy path." "You didn't." I shrugged. "The easy path wasn't freedom." He smiled. "You know I still think you should work with me." I laughed. "Maybe, someday. But right now I need to build something that's mine." He nodded. "I respect that." We stayed in touch. Not romantic. Not complicated. Just mutual respect between two people who understood power differently. A year later, I heard Rayon was released on bail pending appeal. He'd lost everything. His company, his reputation, his control. Someone told me he tried to start over under a new name. I didn't care. He was no longer my story. One evening, I stood in my office, small but mine, looking at photos of the people we'd helped. I thought about the woman I was in that courtroom, scared, silent, and empty. And I thought about who I'd become. Not because of wealth, not because of revenge, but because I chose to use my pain as fuel. I walked away from that marriage with nothing. And I used that nothing to become untouchable. 3 lessons we learn. First lesson is about control and self-worth. Ayla's mistake was allowing Rayon to control every aspect of her life, including her finances, identity, and connections. She learned that real security doesn't come from depending on someone else, but from maintaining your independence and protecting your own resources. When we give someone total control over our survival, we give them the power to destroy us. Second lesson is about revenge versus recovery. Ayla could have spent years trying to hurt Rayon emotionally or seeking wealth from him. Instead, she chose strategic justice through legal channels and turned her experience into purpose. True power isn't about making someone suffer. It's about ensuring they can never hurt you or anyone else again. Revenge keeps you tied to your abuser, but recovery sets you free. Third lesson is about using pain as purpose. Elif made the mistake of fighting alone and lost everything. Ayla learned from that and built alliances. But more importantly, she transformed her trauma into a tool that helps others. The most powerful response to suffering isn't bitterness. It's building something meaningful from the wreckage. When we turn our worst experiences into education, protection, or advocacy for others, we take back control of our narrative and create lasting change that outlives our pain.